Welcome to Adeptus On-Air, the show where we examine how individuals and companies make decisions that drive their business and personal success. Each week, we connect with notable professionals who pull back the curtain on the industries that Adeptus has been on the cutting edge of for the last 30 years, including music, sports, and entertainment, as well as new emerging markets.
Hello. Welcome to another episode of Adeptus On-Air. I am your host, Mike Hoffman. Today, I am joined by Bobby White. Bobby, how you doing today?
Great. Thanks for having me on, Mike. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Normally when I talk to people, some people, go with their actual office background and things like that. And some people want to make their lives look better, and they'll come up with like a nice beach scene behind them or beautiful water. But based upon how you're moving up and down right now, I don't really think that's a backdrop.
No, it's not a backdrop. There's no green screen here. That turquoise water behind me and the sailboats in the distance, that's real here. So yeah, we sailed over here today to the Bahamas.
Well, so Bobby is a YouTube filmmaker who spends basically all of his time, I think the past 6 years or so, living on a boat, traveling around the world, as he is doing today. We'll talk about where you can find him online, but Sailing Doodles is, I know I was looking at this morning, just kind of talking about and showing his adventures kind of, all over the world. So I'm glad you're able to find your Wi-Fi in the middle of whatever ocean you're in and take the time to speak to us today.
Yeah, thank you, Starlink. That's been a big game changer here for sure. The first few years finding internet, because cell phone service in the Caribbean was, in 2016, 2017, they didn't even have 3G.
Yeah.
And so you couldn't hotspot your phone. You had to go find Wi-Fi places. But now with Starlink, you can go anywhere in the world. It's quite nice.
That's amazing. So talk to me. This is obviously something you hear about, you read the paper, this guy's been at sea for 6 years, has done that. And, it's actually really cool to talk to someone who's doing it. So was this something as you were a child before you got into your, career and your adult life that, wow, my dream was to kind of, live on a boat one day? Or did that dream just kind of evolve over time?
It started pretty young. I got my first sailboat when I was in 5th grade, and it was just a little lake sailor, and I kind of, sailed around there. I never really had any formal training, but when you're 12 or however old you are, then you just kind of go until you break stuff and then keep on going, But I read books about it in high school about sailing around the world. And then, even in college, it was before the YouTube was even a thing, because this was in the 90s. Right. I always dreamed about maybe one day retiring early, but there's always that little nagging thing in the back of your head. Am I really going to put enough money away? Am I really going to retire early? And I was kind of worried about it. And then I went in and I became a commercial pilot, went to college for that. And then I lived overseas for quite a while because the early 2000s, there were not many good paying jobs in the U.S. So I was over in Africa for 4 years, the Middle East for a few years. And then I got a job back in the States flying private jets for a corporation. And I did that for about 5 years. And then 2015, I woke up with about the worst headache I could ever have. And I had a brain hemorrhage. And so it was a dural AV fistula. Luckily, it was on the vein side of things. It wasn't on the artery. Otherwise, I might have died. I still could have anyway. But I was a pilot, right? And so I fully recovered. I woke up, had a bad headache. I pulled out my phone to text my girlfriend, and all of a sudden I realized I couldn't read. And I'm like, okay, something more serious is going on here.
Yeah.
And I ended up going to the emergency room. I was in the ICU for like 10 days, and they did a couple different procedures to fix the bleeding. But at that point I knew I couldn't fly anymore, at least for 2 years, because they take your medical away. And I got into real estate for a little bit, and then I hated that. It was the most stressful job I ever had. And I was listening to a podcast called the Sailing Podcast, and they interviewed a couple that was doing, it was Sailing La Vagabond, which are the number one sailing YouTubers online. And they were interviewing them. And so I started watching their show on YouTube, and I thought, you know what, I've always wanted to do it. I've got nothing stopping me now. There's no job or anything. So I just sold everything I owned, bought a boat, talked a friend of mine into going with me, and we started sailing and making videos. And about the time I ran out of money, it was earning enough to live on. And here we are, 7 years later. And, it's living the dream.
Wow. So you travel. That was my next question. So you and a buddy are doing this. Is your buddy still with you?
It was a girlfriend of mine. We weren't really we knew each other. We weren't very good. I mean, we
Mm-hmm.
weren't friends, acquaintances maybe. And it was just good timing with her. She had just got her lease was over. She just was changing
Mm-hmm.
jobs. And I'm like, why don't you come along? And so she sailed with me for about the first year. And then actually my girlfriend now sailed with us for a few months. During that time, we weren't, I mean, shoot, we, just kept in touch. We never dated then or anything. And then I've had multiple people crew and sail with me over the 6-7 years I've been doing it. Cause people come and go and all that, but it's been, yeah, I mean, doing it by yourself out here, number one, is uh, just from a sailing and cruising standpoint, it's not much fun. And
Mm-hmm.
then nobody wants, I mean, I guess there are a few YouTubers that do single handed stuff and make videos about them going around alone, but they tend not to do very well.
So who do you have with you now? How many people are
So
with you?
So we're on a very small boat right now. It's my girlfriend Amanda Zachary, and so she like I said, she sailed with me for a while in season one, and then it's just us two. We're on a 34-foot Sea Ray right now because I'm having a new boat built. I'm having a 52-foot sailing catamaran built. It was supposed to be finished this last summer, and now it's looking like March. So I had already sold my old boat and was ready to get that one, and then all the delays come, and so I needed a small cheap boat to make content
Mm-hmm.
on. And so I bought this to cruise around with, and then I'll plan on selling it in a few months.
Nice. So how have you built your following? Because I know you have, you know, I think almost, you're between a half million and three-quarter of a million subscribers. So you clearly there's a lot of interest in what you're doing, and you'll have one more subscriber when we're done talking because I find
Hey,
this
thanks.
absolutely fascinating. But you know, how are you building that from, hey, I hate real estate, I'm going to go buy a boat and do this, to having such a big following?
Well, I think from day one, I treated it like a job. I know a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people that get into YouTube or social media and all that, and a lot of people told me that, they'll be like, hey, I made 3 or 4 videos. They didn't really do anything. So I kind of gave it up. I'm like, try
Yeah.
30 or 40 videos. If you still
Yeah.
haven't gotten any traction, then give it up. And so like I took it as a job from the very beginning. I posted every week, one video a week for the first, I think, year and a half. And then once I
Mm-hmm.
got good enough at editing to it wasn't taking me, 17 hours to edit a video.
Yeah.
Now it takes me like 4 or 5. So like I do
Mm-hmm.
at least 2 videos a week, and I do it every week. And so I think that's the main thing is just, it is a job. It's the best job you could have, but you have to treat it like a job and you have to do that. And then it's, as far as like getting the initial traction, getting that first 1,000 subscribers is probably the hardest, and then getting the
Mm-hmm.
10,000 is almost as hard as that. And then it gets easier, honestly, as you more popular you are. Like getting to 10,000 subscribers was probably harder than getting to 100,000 subscribers.
Sure.
You know, so
Because I
it's
think that's
just
how the
it's
algorithms work. I think the more people you have, then you pop out on some people's feeds more. I think you're easier to find, even if I'm not necessarily looking for you.
right.
I think as you become well known. So for people who don't understand it, so when you say this is now supporting yourself, something like a YouTube, as a what I'll call you a YouTuber,
Sure.
you're generating revenue through YouTube. So can you just
Yeah.
explain to people how you're generating that revenue?
Well, there's generally 3 different revenue streams for most YouTubers. You have your AdSense directly from YouTube itself. So YouTube takes 45%, the creator gets 55%. And so, when you watch an ad in the before a YouTube starts, or, a mid-roll ad, we kind of split that with YouTube. And then it's not a whole lot of money. It depends on your
Mhm.
genre and it depends on the
Yeah,
time of year. Like January is always the worst month. I'm sorry. It's like ad rates go to the floor because everybody just spent everything in December.
exactly.
But yeah, so it depends on your genre. Like I said, anywhere from $7 to $11 per 1,000 views. That doesn't sound like a whole lot, but if you get a video that gets 100,000 views, there's $1,000 right there.
Yeah, yeah.
But and so you keep on doing that. So there's the AdSense, then probably, and then the next one would be like viewer funded, like Patreon or one of those. So we have almost 2,000 patrons, and so it's kind of a subscription. So
Mhm.
they have different levels they can subscribe to, and they get different perks for that, like early access to the videos and like behind the scenes video. And we don't do anything too risque, but like we do have to cut some stuff out for censor stuff. So they kind of give them the uncensored stuff. We don't show nudity or anything like that, but like if we're doing something stupid or cussing too much, then we'll leave that in there for the patrons to see.
Sure,
And then
sure.
they get other perks, discounts on merchandise. Plus, then we invite a patron twice a year to sail with us.
Oh, that's
And
fun.
so yeah, so we just do a drawing for that, and so so they get perks like that. And then the other last uh, I guess revenue source would be direct ads. So like if
Mhm.
like you see Skillshare or AG1 or all those people that or Babbel and all that they I create an ad and put it in my own video, and I get, and so that's about, so
Yeah, so you'll
those are
read
the
an
main
ad like
three.
as we're talking right now. If I said stop for a second and I go,
Yeah,
hey, yeah,
exactly.
and I do my 30-second spiel for whatever I want to talk about.
Sure.
So it's,
And
yeah,
then I
so
mean,
that so you yeah, so you know what you need to generate basically to keep you sailing. And your ultimate objective at the end of the day is if I have enough to keep this dream going, I'm going to keep it going.
sure. Well, I mean, not just that. I mean, like I have several spin-off channels. I have a RV life channel. It's called Glamping Doodles. I have a flying channel called Flying Doodles. I have the Doodles podcast and a
Mhm.
few other things. And that's kind of the long-term goal, is to have basically the Doodle network where I have,
Sure.
and I'm not filming all this stuff. You know what I mean? I have other people do it. So like I have a host for Flying Doodles. And
Mhm.
then so I am filming the RV life stuff right now, but eventually it would be kind of spread off to where I have several different revenue streams, and I may not be, I may not, I'm taking a little bit from each one, which adds up to a lot, right?
Oh yeah, no
So
doubt. Yeah.
yeah, then I don't actually have to do the work anymore eventually. So
Well,
even with the sailing
that's the
channel.
American dream, and you see that a lot in the real estate world with rentals, where
Right.
once you can buy a rental, and once that rental generates enough revenue for you to buy a second rental, and then a third rental, you now have three different income streams, and you're really doing nothing. You did
Right.
the work, you got the money to buy them, and then that money coming in is simply additional revenue streams, either in addition to what your main source of work is, or in retirement, or even before retirement, that could be enough to support you.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of one of those things. If any business owner would tell you, if it's a task you don't like and takes a lot of time, hire somebody to do it. They can probably
Yeah,
end up doing it faster, and it frees up your time to go create new revenue streams.
sure,
So
sure.
I do have an editor that edits probably half of my videos, and so
Oh,
that's one
good.
thing. Although I've been doing it a lot myself lately, just because I've had the time and I've kind of enjoyed it. But when I am too busy, I just have him do it.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk about a typical day. So you're in the water, and you wake up in the morning, and all right, let's assume it's not a day where if you're doing a podcast or you don't have any interviews with someone like me. So how are you spending your you know 15 or 16 waking hours on an average day?
Well, it depends. I mean, so if we're not actually moving somewhere that day, like I'll get up, make some tea and some breakfast, and then as soon as that, I'll go for a run and work out. Take the dinghy to shore and go for a run, or sometimes we're on a dock, but most of the time just take the dinghy ashore and go for a run. And then come back and I work till probably noon on the computer. I'll edit. I just feel like I'm better at working in the mornings, and I
Okay.
like to run too because I've had some of my best ideas. But I don't listen to music when I run or anything like that, because I have some of my best ideas when I'm just sitting there, my brain's just going somewhere while I'm running, not thinking. I'm
Yeah.
like, oh wow, that was a great idea. I should do that. And then, it depends. Sometimes go find a little, shack on shore for lunch. It depends where we are. The Bahamas, it's kind of barren. There's not a whole lot here. Although the place we are here right now, there's a lot. We'll probably go to lunch here in a little while. Just go do some exploring. Find something interesting to do. If there's something interesting on the land to go film, we'll do that. Like, if there's a blue hole or there's some kind of interesting sculpture
Mhm.
park or something, we'll go film some content there. Uh, Back to the boat, kind of, and then we have, you end up making friends with other boaters out here. So, have three or four other friends that we kind of travel around with, other boats. And then, we'll go to happy hour or something, go to dinner, or maybe we'll go to somebody's boat for dinner, or we'll just cook dinner on
Mhm.
the boat. Um, and then when we're actually moving or sailing, something like that, it's pretty much the same thing, except instead of coming back to work on the computer, we'll pull up the anchor and start sailing, and we're filming all that as we get to the new destination. And then
Yeah.
you get to the new destination, and you got to fly the drone, you got to go
Mhm.
ashore and kind of explore and find some
Yeah.
stuff to film and all that.
The days that you are mostly at sea. So, I'm sure there's some days where you're not near land. You
Right.
know, if there's back to back to back days, obviously, you enjoy running, you enjoy exploring, you enjoy going to a restaurant, coffee, whatever, and you don't have
Yeah.
that. Is there a
Yeah. That's
tendency, or you're just so used to it to go kind of stir crazy when there's not a lot of?
Well, it depends on how long the passage is.
Mhm.
Honestly, like a 3 or 4 day passage, where it's 3 overnights and you're never touching land. You're sailing the entire time. A lot of people say, where do you sleep at night? No, you keep sailing at night. It's not like you can just drop anchor in the middle of the ocean. And so, that the 3 day sails are the worst, because you're like, okay, it's only 3 days. And you're like, okay, only 2 days. And you're just thinking like that. But Like our longest passage was 17 days from Mexico to French Polynesia. And for the first couple days, you're kind of like, I don't know, you feel a little stir crazy. But then after that, you get into a routine. Everybody has a watch. If you're doing a long passage like that, we'll have at least three of us. Four is better. So that everybody has like a scheduled watch, like a 3 hour
Mhm.
watch where they have to be up at the helm. Just kind of, I mean, we have an autopilot, so you don't have to steer or anything, but, just watching out for other boats or weather or
Yeah.
something like that. But then kind of so just everybody takes their shift. Obviously you can't run, so you do something. I mean, I don't know, body weight training. A lot of boats, I keep a little weight set on there to do some stuff.
Mhm.
And then, you know, as soon as the sun goes down on that sail, we'll generally pop up a movie on either a laptop or a little projector or something, watch a movie all
Mhm.
together in the cockpit, maybe a TV show after that, and then everybody goes to bed pretty early on boats. Like they call 9 p.m. cruisers midnight because
Oh,
especially because if there's nothing to do on land or there's nothing to
wow.
do, it's like okay, what to do now? So yeah,
Yeah.
9 p.m. and then you're up with the sun at like 5:30 or 6, and then just kind of do it all over again.
So, how far in advance do you course out where you're going? Like right now, you're in the Bahamas. So, do you know the next 2 months? This is my plan. Obviously, there's weather things that always change
Sure.
your plan, but I don't think you just pick up today and say, "Hey, I'm going here today." I imagine there's some logic behind your schedule.
Yeah, so there's different areas that you should be in at different times. Like, if you don't want to be in the Caribbean during hurricane season, right?
Yeah.
So you kind of avoid that, or you can. You just have to really pay attention to the weather. Uh, so yeah, I mean, generally, I know what I'm doing for the next 6 months, and it depends. Like we've been bouncing around for a couple different boats for the last few years because this boat build has kind of been a project, and so it's kind of made things a little different because we haven't been on one single boat. Like this summer,
Mhm.
I bought a boat, like a 37-foot sailboat, and we sailed around Greece for 3 months, and then we came back and bought this boat. And we're going to use this boat in the Bahamas for 4 or 5 months.
Mhm.
But that said, like we're parking this boat on Friday down in the at a marina in the Bahamas, and we got to go back. We're going to host a flotilla. So what we do is every twice a year, and that's one of the things when we invite a patron to join us, we host a flotilla, which is like 6 or 8 boats, and then we
Mhm.
all sail around together. So we're hosting that in the British Virgin Islands in next
Nice.
week. So we're going to fly down there, do that, and then we're going to go to Miami for the boat show. And then after that, we're going to get in the RV and go cruise around for a few months, making content for the RV channel, and then back to the boat sometime in April, and then film for 3 or 4 months, and then hopefully this summer, June-ish maybe, I'll get the new boat, and then from that point it'll change because then we're going to be on that boat basically full time, and just kind
Mhm.
of go. It depends on where we end up picking up the boat. With all the problems in the Middle East and even with the
Mhm.
Panama Canal right now, it's making shipping very difficult and very expensive. So the boat's being built in Thailand, and well, originally we were going to ship it to the East Coast this spring, but the Suez is shut down and the Panama is like a 3 month
Mhm.
delay. So who knows when I'm actually going to get the boat.
So, what the new boat, besides it being bigger,
Mhm.
what are you most excited about? Like, what you have any new features or things that you don't have now that you're looking forward to having?
Yeah, it's kind of a. I mean, it's pretty new in the sailing industry for this, so it's going to be a hybrid.
Mhm.
So not only do you have, obviously, engines and wind, that's a hybrid technically, I guess, but he's also going to have electric. So the motors are going to be electric. So normally on, say, a 52-foot catamaran, you'd have two propulsion motors and one generator, all diesel. And so then, you have three internal combustion engines and then all the maintenance that goes with three of those and the fuel burn with three of those. So mine's going to have two electric motors that run off a 210 kilowatt hour battery pack, which is like the equivalent of three Teslas.
Mhm.
And then it will also have a very big generator capable of running both motors and charging the batteries and everything. Plus, it'll have about 5,000 watts of solar on it to charge the batteries as well. So, uh, it should be a pretty fuel efficient because I only have to run the generator every now and again. I
Mhm.
mean, the battery packs will only propel the boat for like 8 to 12 hours, depending on how fast you're going. But for most of the sailing you're doing, I mean, that's your average length of sail, right? Now, the overnight stuff and the longer passages, yeah. I mean, but it's a sailboat, right? You try to sail and not use any of it.
Right. So
So,
that's where I was just going to go with that. So your 17-day voyage that you described.
mhm,
Obviously, you can't just pull over and get any supplies, whether it's fuel,
right.
food, or anything like that. So how does that all that additional planning that goes into that?
Oh, for sure. Like we had basically our whole route when we actually I delivered a 50-foot Beneteau. It was a monohull sailboat from Mexico to Thailand, and we did it over 6 months. And we left, I think, Mexico in March, and we made it to Thailand in February, September. And yeah, we had the whole route planned out the whole way, and then also the route was planned that way because seasonally there's different weather patterns. And
Sure.
so like we needed to be in Indonesia to go through Indonesia in like July or something like that, because that's when the winds are out of the east. You want to go that way. Like right now, if you were to go into Indonesia, the winds are out of the west, so you don't want to do that. So it's just seasonally doing all that. Plus, then we had to wait till March in the first place because we had to wait for hurricane season to end in the South Pacific. So it's
Sure.
all that. And then as far as like food and supplies and all that, most boats, I mean, like, so we had a water desalinator. So he takes seawater, puts it through a reverse osmosis membrane, and makes fresh water. And that thing, I think, was like 30 gallons an hour or something like that. So it was pretty. It could handle all our water needs. Also, we had 120 gallons of water on board and water tanks. So if for some reason, and we always kept at least two of them completely full. We would use the water maker to fill them. So if our water maker failed at some point, we would have at least 60 gallons of water to get us the rest of the way. And at that point, okay, maybe you're not showering anymore, but at least you have something to
But who
drink,
cares
right?
at that point? Yeah.
Yeah. So you have enough to get there. And then food wise, yeah, I mean, you have freezers and all that stuff to freeze a lot of food, and eat a lot of canned food and stuff like that. I mean, if you're doing a long passage, you'll have fresh food for the first week, 10 days, but then it starts to go bad, right? So you kind of use all that up first, and then you're going to the canned stuff. And people fish a lot too. I'm not a very big fisherman, but a lot of people are, and they will, catch their own food and underway and everything. And I mean, I've done it before where we, pull up a tuna and like fillet it right there and have some sushi, so there's a lot of people who do that. It's not really, I mean, I'm not like, generally when we're doing that, it's somebody else that's on the boat that's a bigger fisherman than I am, and they do that.
Yeah. That's when you go to someone else's boat for sushi.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But I mean, then you got to logistically, you got to plan out like, okay, you got to know where to go for, clearing customs and all that. There's websites that help you out for that, that are give you a lot of that information. And then there's, apps that kind of like, I guess it'd be kind of like Yelp for boats, right? Where you'd be like, people leave reviews on this anchorage or this marina and all that. So people do
Yeah.
that.
So, scariest moment you've experienced in the past 6 years?
Yeah. So there's been a couple, but yeah, one was really bad. I was single-handed sailing. It's probably not the smartest thing to do, but I kind of wanted to do it anyway. Going around Cape Hatteras, and past Cape Hatteras, all right. So it was coming from the Chesapeake over to we were sailing south from there, and the winds just after I passed Cape Hatteras, which is kind of a dangerous spot in itself, because the Gulf Stream current comes that way, and if the wind's not right, it makes things pretty sketchy. I was down around Cape Lookout a little bit further south than that when the winds just unforecastedly started getting stronger and stronger and stronger, and so I'm almost there. I got like 10, 11, no, I think it was like 14 miles to go. Uh, but the last 14 miles I had to like point straight into the wind. And so I had to motor into it to get to shore. And at some point during the rough weather, because it was blowing 35 knots, and so the seas were kind of big and bouncy, and it had dislodged my standby anchor. And so that was actually hanging under the boat. And so I didn't know it. And so when I started my motor, that actually got caught in the prop.
Oh.
And what's supposed to happen is it's called a shaft saver. So there's supposed to be like this shear plate between the shaft and your transmission that will shear, and so that it doesn't cook your transmission. Well, that didn't work, and it cooked my transmission, and that basically caught on fire, and it burned through all my water lines down there. It burned through a lot of my electrical lines. Thank God I had like the high quality, high temperature fuel lines, because those were pretty well singed. So all of a sudden, like I don't have any power, and it's in the middle of the night, and it's blowing 35 knots. And I'm trying to turn my engine off, because the button's right there to turn the engine off, because I know something's wrong. I can see the smoke, and then there's smoke coming out of the inside of the boat, and but it won't turn off because that electrical line is burned through. So like I had to go down in it. So it was like easily could have died down there, because like I couldn't see anything. It was filled with smoke. I had to hold my breath, go down in there, open the engine room, and like thankfully I knew my boat pretty well. I knew exactly where that, it's called a solenoid, that you pull the solenoid to shut off fuel to the engine. And so I knew exactly where it was on the engine. So in the dark, I just was able to do it and turn it off and then run back upstairs and breathe before I could inhaled all the smoke. But then now, okay, that's bad enough. Like, I don't know if I'm taking on water. I don't know exactly what's going on. And then I have to sail the boat. So then I have to put some sails out and sail the boat in 35 knots winds, another 14 miles. But the thing is that going into the wind, you can't go straight into the wind sailing. So you actually have to go more than double the distance. So 14 miles was
Mhm.
really more like 30 miles of sailing. And so
Yeah.
that took another 6 hours to get close enough to land where I mean, at this point, I'm already, well, maybe not at that point, but at some point I was in touch with the Coast Guard,
Yeah. I was
talking
going to
to
say,
them.
yeah, that was my next question.
So I was just keeping them aware of things in case things got worse. But I was able to sail to within a couple miles of land where things were much more calm, and then they actually came and towed me in
Mhm.
to where I could drop anchor. And then then the next day I had to get a tow to a marina where I could start getting the work done. It ended up being pretty expensive, and I ended up selling the boat rather than do that because like there's people that do boat build channels, but that's not my thing.
Yeah.
I would have had to spend 6 months in a yard working on it, and in fact I sold it to a guy, and that's exactly what he did. He spent 6 months on it, and now it's back in the water running. So, but yeah, that was a bit harrowing, and easily, if anything else had gone wrong, you could easily, I'm jumping in the life raft or something,
Yeah. Yeah. And obviously, you've never had to do that, knock
No,
on wood,
thankfully.
which is great.
Yeah.
So, favorite area that you always look forward to going back to?
Well, I always tell people, like, for Americans, the Bahamas is super easy to get to,
Mhm.
and some of the prettiest water and prettiest beaches you will
Okay.
see in the world. The downside is it's pretty expensive cruising here, sailing
Mhm.
here, because basically if you go to Nassau, everything's almost double because everything has to come from the U.S. anyway. That goes to Nassau, and then when it goes out to the outer islands, like here, it's doubled again.
Yeah.
Like, so if you go get, like, I bought a pack of English muffins. What was it? 6 English muffins the other day. It's $12.
Yeah.
And then like a case of beer here is $75.
Right.
And so it's just pretty expensive. But it's some of the prettiest water, and it's very easy to get to, and it's really
Mhm.
good sailing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the Abacos and the Exumas are some of my favorites. And then for culture and all that, I love cruising in the Med,
Mhm.
Greece in particular, because it's just, yeah, you pull up to one of these little towns and they have, their town dock, and you med more on there, and you walk off the back of your boat and there's a cafe right there, or coffee shop or bar or whatever. And then you walk up the hill and you go see some ancient Greek ruins.
Mhm.
And it's pretty cool doing that. And it's super cheap. Cruising in the Med is actually very cheap, especially Greece. It's like you get on the dock for $10 a night. And then, your meal is $8 with a glass of wine or something, um, and so, but I mean, there are obviously some expensive places
Mhm.
in the Med.
Yeah.
If you
Sure.
go to some places in France and stuff like that. But as far as like just remote and just amazing places, the South Pacific is great. I mean, you want to do some
Mhm.
diving? That's where you go. The diving there is fantastic, in like French Polynesia and Fiji, and it's pretty remote to get to. And although it is a little expensive because they're pretty remote islands, but I
What
really love
about
those
the one
places.
place you haven't gone to that you
Uh,
really want to get to?
Yeah, Australia and New Zealand. I think that's going to be on the new boat. I'd like to go over there and do both of those. I think
Mhm.
it really depends on where I get the boat, like
Yeah.
when I'll get through there,
Now, I
because
imagine that would involve some consecutive days of, being in the water to get
oh, for
down to
sure.
Australia. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going across the South Pacific, I mean, it's number one, it's 17 to 20 something days just to French Polynesia, and then between the
Yeah.
main island groups there, it's, sorry, 3 or 4 days, and then it's 4 or 5 days to Niue, and then it's 4 or 5 days to
Mhm.
Tonga, and then it's four or
Yeah.
five days to Fiji, and you know, there's some long distances in there. But I'd love to go there and sail around.
Amazing. So, how can people? So, give me your YouTube channel, and then give me some of your other sites in terms of with the RVs and things like that, so people can kind of check you out.
So Sailing Doodles is the name of the show on YouTube. If you just Google or look YouTube Sailing Doodles,
Mhm.
it'll be one of the first. It'll be probably the first thing that pops up. The reason it's called Sailing Doodles is when I started the show, I had two Labradoodles named Maverick and Goose. So they sailed with me for the first 3 4 years. Unfortunately, they were already over 6 years old
Yeah.
when I started the show, and they're big dogs. They were about 80, 90 pounds each. So Maverick, he passed away at 9.5, and Goose passed away at like 11. And so, that was a few years ago. So
Mhm.
that's why it's called Sailing Doodles. And then hence I also have, it's Instagram, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Same thing. And then, Glamping Doodles. I mean, I'm just
Mhm.
sticking with I already got the name recognition of Doodles, right? So it's
Of course.
Glamping Doodles. That one's got RV life. I got a couple hundred videos up there. And then Flying Doodles. That
Mhm.
one's got over 100,000 subscribers and it's doing well. I have a host for that show. And then the Doodles podcast. It's mostly like boating related stuff, but there's some other stuff on there about content creation and things. But that's on either YouTube or wherever you get your audio podcasts.
Yeah, because I imagine you talk about boating, but I imagine since you're seeing so many amazing things, I gotta believe, you're gonna be showing cultural things and things you're kind of seeing, outside the water.
Sure. I mean, like, I think one of my most recent videos was talking about like the end of vlogs, because I think that especially the day of the general vlog is kind of over. Like the days of a new Casey Neistat coming out,
Mhm.
it's just not going to happen. I mean, everything needs to be much more niche, and then just the way the trends are going online with short form content. It really, YouTube and other platforms are pushing this vertical short form content so much, but that stuff just does not pay very well at all. Like
Mhm.
I have a YouTube short that has 30 million views, and
Wow.
it's only earned like a little over $2,000. And it's kind of like, if I had a long form video that had 30 million views, that'd be worth like it'd be worth $300,000. You
Yeah.
know, and so I think it's just making it not as financially viable. And I don't really know why they're doing. I mean, I get it because they're trying to compete. Like YouTube's trying to compete with TikTok and Instagram
Mhm.
and all that. But like, that's got to hurt their bottom line too. Because if I'm splitting my revenue with YouTube,
Yeah.
they're making less money too. And so it's
Well, of
just kind
course.
of,
Yeah. Yeah.
so I don't know what the long term is. And like my viewers, I mean, so short form doesn't really work with me. It's not my I'm 75% of my viewers are over the age of 45, which is
Mhm.
kind of unique among YouTube. Mostly it's
Yeah.
the inverse of that. And so like when I put out a short, yeah, I might get some new viewers, but they're all the younger people and it's not really my
Mhm.
demographic and they don't really
Yeah.
translate into long form watch views. So
Yeah.
it's just a little difficult. But you have to
Interesting.
evolve. You have to evolve with
Yeah.
I mean, you can't otherwise you stay a dinosaur and you have to evolve,
Yeah. Well, clearly you've done something right to get to your subscription level. So clearly, your content has interest, and clearly you're getting it out there because
Well, thank you.
as you said, that's no easy task to get that high. And I only imagine a year from now, 2 years from now, what that number will be. So,
Yeah,
nothing but
it
continued success to you.
yeah, and you just I mean like yeah, I've kind of just even recently kind of altered my editing style to kind of match with the audience retention type stuff. Just snappier, quicker edits. It's I mean I think there is a need for podcasts like long form stuff so you can actually have a in-depth
Yeah.
conversation and get express your points on that. But I mean as far as but there's also the YouTube type stuff to like snappy keep everybody's attention so they're because that's the two
Yeah.
metrics YouTube looks at the most is your click through rate, how many times you click on the thumbnail when you see it, and then your audience retention. If you have high on both of those, the video will do really well.
Yeah, well, what I think I need to do is I need to do some recording in some remote locations. I think that would be
Yeah.
great for my podcast.
All
So
right,
I'm
come on down.
thinking your chair right there might be a perfect spot for me to record one.
There you
So,
go. I like it. Come on down.
but listen, Bobby, I really appreciate you taking the time. I've really enjoyed this. This is fascinating. I knew when I saw your background, I was gonna like this call. So I'm a little nauseous right now from the bouncing,
Sorry. Yeah.
but
Sorry.
I think I'll be okay. But
All right.
appreciate the time. Thanks for listening, everybody, and best of luck to you going forward.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks for listening to Adeptus On-Air. If you like this episode, please subscribe and leave a review. The views and opinions by the podcast speakers and guests are solely their own and do not reflect the opinions of Adeptus. This podcast provides general information only and is not intended to constitute advice.